Well guys, I screwed up and we got to fix it in this video. So as you guys know, we did a 3-link on the front, a 4-link on the back of this Toyota Land Cruiser FJ40. Now when I set up all my brackets for the coilovers, I kind of screwed up. Now I already got the rear end fixed up, but let me go in a little bit of depth on what is going on. So I figured with setting up coilovers, as far as flexing goes, that you would use your bump stops. I bought hydraulic bump stops. I figured I would use my hydraulic bump stop to stop the travel of the coilover on articulation. Now that is not how you're supposed to set these up. Basically how you want to set a coilover suspension up anyway, a leaf spring is totally different, but a coilover suspension, you want to set up your hydraulic bump stop so that they basically stiffen up the last, if it's a 3-inch bump stop, it'll stiffen up the last 3 inches of travel of your vertical travel. So that means, if you were to jump it or if you were to come off like a rock ledge and just slam the bottom down, that would save your axle from smacking off of whatever, your oil pan or your steering off your oil pan, whatever. That is what a hydraulic bump stop is for. These coilovers have like a 1-inch rubber, basically a bump stop on the shaft on the bottom of the shock. That is what is supposed to stop the shock travel on articulation. Now you could set up, I'm not saying that this is the only way to do it, you could set up your bump stop to be basically both a vertical stop and an articulation stop. But the problem with that is you would have to mount your bump stop basically right where your shock mounts. And that is very hard to do because when you articulate naturally, the axle swings a little bit. So when you're on your up travel side, you're probably 6 inches away from the frame, or maybe even more, where you would actually need to mount your bump stop. So that makes for a huge bracket that is in the way of just about everything, especially on the front. On the rear you probably could do it, but on the front that's not really possible. There's so much stuff in the way. So some builds I'm sure you could get away with it, but 99% of people building a rock crawler or a truck similar to this on coilovers, you mount the bump stop off the frame and then you build a pad or whatever off the axle, and that is what stops the axle from moving vertically. And like I said, the bump stops in the shock or in the coilover is what stops basically what stops the tire from going through your fender or whatever. So the problem is I had on full stuff, I just left like 1 inch of exposed shock shaft just because I figured I would use my bump stop to stop the travel. That's not going to work. So on the rear, all I had to do was just notch out where it sits on the frame on the upper bracket, just to drop that bracket down a little bit. So now we are perfect. I got about a 1/2 inch from the tire to the fender. That is, that rubber bump stop in the shock is going to collapse a little bit. Maybe not a 1/2 inch, but I wanted it to make sure that it's going to clear. The front is going to be a lot more work because I don't have fenders on it. The mounts for the fenders are not going to work, and so I don't really know where my tire needs to stop at. So what we need to do is basically somehow get these fenders mounted up, somehow get the grill mounted up so we can mount the fenders. The problem with that is we don't have any cross member in the frame anymore. We cut all that out when we extended or when we widened up the frame. So we got to do a lot of work to actually get these fenders on. So how these fenders mount is it bolts to the body here, but the main mount is down there on the bottom, which bolted onto the frame right there, which my coilover mount is right in the way of. And then also we need a clearance stick for the steering box. So basically what we need to do is start cutting the fender out right here, probably a big notch in it like that, and then we need to cut the front out to clear the steering box. We got to get the fender bolted on. Now I may be able to get away with not building my whole cross member right now. I should be able to just bolt the fender on back here and use something to hold the front up. That way we can put the axle back underneath, get all of our links, our temporary links in any way, and flex the axle with the tire on to see where we need to limit the travel, to see how much shock shaft we have left with this mount. But the problem I see is we can't lower this shock mount on the bottom, which would be the easiest spot, just because we have the steering shaft going through this coilover mount. So we would have to cut down the top of the shock shaft or the shock mount, which is going to be a lot more work, but I think we can do it. I really don't want to recut all this just because there's so much welding involved, and plate is so expensive these days. I really don't want to waste all this plate. I think depending on how much we need to move it, I think we can make these still work. We'll just cut it, we'll cut new tabs, and then we'll just weld new tabs on and weld it all back up that way. So that's the game plan. We got to start cutting fenders. We got to get these things mounted up, get the axle back underneath. Like I said, get all the links back in, flex this thing with the tire on to see where we need to stop our travel. All right, we got this thing somewhat together, and this whole inner fender, got it cut out for the coilover. The one thing I'm seeing is we got a lot of work to do on this fender. We got to come up. I mean, to really get our full stuff that I'm looking for, we really got to come cut this fender up into this area here. I think a lot of people I've seen with these FJs have done that. They come all the way up here and then just build some sort of tube fender or something to tie it all together. But I think either way, this fender has to go. We can use this top piece, which I want, which I want to use because this ties into the grill down there, which, you know, the grill that goes all the way across the core support grill, whatever you want to call it. This bolts onto it, so I want to utilize that. So I think what I'll do is I should be able to keep that line here. I might be able to cut it up just a little bit, but keep this line and then come up to maybe 1 inch down from the top just to keep the fender somewhat in place. And then we'll have to, like I said, do some sort of tube or something there. But the problem is this whole inner fender is going to be gone, so we'll have to redo some of that too. That shouldn't be a big deal. We can use, I mean, sheet metal or maybe some plastic sheeting, something to build an inner fender. But another thing I'm seeing is, like I said in last video, I'm going to do a different steering column, which is going to be higher up, so we're going to need a longer shaft. I finally got my shaft in, but this is already hitting. So either way, I think I'm just going to have to redo that entire mount. This one, I'm going to cut down on the bottom, and we'll just kind of match that to this side with a cut down. And then, like I said, we got to drop this down. But first, we need to get the tire at full stuff where I actually think it will be, and then do our measuring for how much we need to drop that upper coil mount. Okay, so that is about full stuff, and we are binding, or we are hitting the tire or the panhard bar off of the diff cover. So that's definitely the limiting factor there. You can see we have about an inch of shaft exposed on that shock. So essentially we need to drop that shock down about, that's the shock mount up here, down about 1.5 inches, just because I want to give about a 1/2 inch of clearance for that rubber damper right here, this little bump stop on the shock itself, to compress. So 1/2 inch I feel like should be enough. Now as far as cutting this all the way up, I don't think we will have to. I think we'll be fairly close right there. You know, that looking straight across the tire right there, you can see it looks pretty good. It looks like it should clear as long as we don't come way out. I probably won't go as much. That's like, I mean, that fender's probably like 1 foot. I might go like 8 inches out and just kind of use that as a fender with some tube or something. But we need to fix this shock mount first. So we're gonna just remake this mount. That one, like I said, we'll just notch up, drop it down. But this one we have to remake anyway, because that cutout for the steering shaft is not gonna work, especially when we get in our GM steering column. So I'm gonna go design up a new mount. We'll cut that out, and then once we get that side figured out, we'll jump over here, cut that one down a little bit, and get that one to fit. check that out, guys. That is the sound of success. We got our bumps. You can see that's the bump stop I was talking about on the shock itself. We want that to bottom out on articulation. So we are perfect right now at full stuff on this side and full droop on this side. These are a 16-inch coilover. Oh, look at that. We do have a little bit of interference there. Man, I did cut this back. This coilover mount is being a pain in the ass. It looks like we got to do some work here. I did cut this one back just because the steering shaft was close, and without having my column in and the shaft in, I wanted to make sure there was enough room, but looks like we're going to need to notch that out. Man, that sucks. I'm going to wait till I get my actual shaft in and my column in, get the steering set up, and then I guess we'll have to notch that out. Hopefully there's enough room in there from that coilover to clear the spring, because the spring is about a 1/2 inch. So I guess if we notch that about a 1/2 inch, we should be okay. But man, that sucks. I was really hoping that would clear. But either way, other than that, I guess we are good to go. Everything is looking and clearing really good. So we don't have any binding. That's pretty much close to maxed out at that angle there. And then that side gets about maxed out on when this side is at full droop. So we are looking good, other than that one little issue that we got to fix. Also, you guys saw I did build a plate to bolt onto this side. I didn't want to weld anything on, but I wanted something to tie this side together just so it strengthens up that mount. And once we get the steering in, I am going to run some gussets up there and strengthen it a little bit more that way. But I think that bolt-on plate is going to work very well to help strengthen up that mount. Well, guys, one little setback shouldn't be too much to fix. I guess that's the price we pay when we don't have everything in that we need to clearance, like our steering. Kind of important, but like I said, I don't have the parts in yet, so we'll have to fix that. But other than that, we're looking really good. Everything else seems to be clearing really good. Well, anyways, guys, that is a wrap for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Once you go smash that thumbs up button, comment, subscribe. We'll catch you in the next one.